Hello everybody, it's R. Beal with Oak Tree Gun Club again, and today we're going to be looking at how to take apart and clean the 1911 pistol. The 1911 pistol, of course, gets its name from when it was adopted by the U.S. Army in 1911. It's very remarkable in the fact that it's been in military hands for 101 years now, one way or another, and it's still used by law enforcement and many other military organizations today. So generally speaking, any 1911 you encounter is definitely going to have generally the same design features and the same steps needed to take it apart and clean it. Today in front of you I have the Kimber Eclipse Custom II and I have the SIG, a 1911, and these are two very common examples of 1911s that you're going to find today. And I brought out two of them today because there's different guide rod setups and some other things on these 1911s that we're going to go into. So first we're going to start with the SIG. I'm going to go ahead and put the Eclipse away for a second here. And with the 6-hour 1911, this follows a more traditional John Browning design of the recoil system guide rod. So we're going to go into that. So the first step, what we're going to do today is, of course, make sure it's unloaded. So I'm going to remove the source of feed and the magazine. I'm going to check and visually make sure there's nothing in the chamber. Also do a physical inspection just to be sure. I feel and I see that there are no rounds in the chamber and the magazine has been removed. We can see that this gun is completely empty. So another note before we get into this is that the 1911 is not the kind of pistol that you're just going to want to drop the slide on. That is very bad for this pistol. Generally you don't want to do that unless you have to when the gun does not have ammunition in it. So what we want to do is to release the slide. We're going to drop down on the slide release, but we're going to very carefully ensure that we just coast the slide forward. It actually will over time. It doesn't take a whole lot of time, but over time it will start to damage the internals, and you're going to have a gun that needs to go see the gunsmith if you let the slide drop too many times. Alright, so now we have that, and we have verified that the gun is unloaded. We're going to go ahead and put the weapon on manual safe, which we're just going to push that up. Some guns will have an ambidextrous safety, this one does not. So basically we're just going to lock it, and by locking the safety in, not only is the sear and engagement stopped, but the slide is locked in the forward position. Now we're going to tilt the gun front side up just like that. I'm going to have to push in this plunger right here. Now we got to be very careful. There's a lot of spring tension, there's a lot of spring pressure, so we definitely want to point this in a safe direction as we're doing this so we don't get hit in the face or anything bad happens, which has been known to happen on this series of handgun. So we're going to push it in, but as we're pushing in our plunger, our recoil spring plunger, we're going to be sliding the bushing. This is called the barrel bushing. We're going to be sliding this unit, basically we're going to be sliding that to our left. And slowly, and you can see the spring come out, we're going to pull out the recoil spring plunger and the recoil spring itself. Okay, so that's the large spring that's going to be operating this mechanism. So now what we're going to do is our bushing has been slid all the way over like such. Now we're actually going to have to move it in the other direction to release it to the right, and then it should be able to pull directly out. Now you'll see on a custom 1911 that has been hand fitted, the bushing that we just released here, we did it very easily on this gun, but on a custom match fit 1911, we're actually going to have to use what's called a bushing wrench, which goes over the bushing and safely basically releases and takes out the bushing. Okay, so now we have that. We basically have a 1911 that does not have a bushing, the recoil spring plunger, or the recoil spring. So now we're going to go ahead and take it off safe. We're going to put it on manual fire. And we're going to have to move the slide back to the rear. And at some point, we're going to have to stop at what's called the takedown notch. Now this notch is not the takedown notch. That's the notch that leaves the slide to the rear on the last shot. But this little tiny notch is what we call the takedown notch on the 1911. Now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to, this unit right here is called the slide stop. We're going to have to push the slide stop, which is this little dot right here. We're going to have to push it from the other side. I'm going to see if you can see that, if I have it properly lined up. Okay, so let's see if you can get that angle there. Basically, as I pushed it, this unit starts to come out. Okay, so as that comes out, I'm basically just going to lift it out of the gun itself. Okay, so that unit just came out. And then I'm going to basically push the slide off the gun forward in a forward position. Okay, so now I have my frame. I'm going to set that to the side. We are not going to be taking this apart any further at this time. And this is basically the other end of the recoil spring plunger system as designed by John Browning. And unlike a Glock or an XD or an M&P where the barrel actually lifts out to the rear, on a 1911 we're going to have to make sure our link is pushed forward And then we can actually bring the barrel out of the slide like such. Okay, so basically the method that you saw there was a little more involved. If you're a Glock owner or used to the modern polymer handguns, this is a little bit more complicated than your typical handgun design. But then again, we have to remember that this firearm is not of this era. It does not come from this time frame. Things were a lot different back then. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and bust out the M-Pro 7 gun cleaner, my favorite type of solvent to be using for this situation. And we're basically going to be spraying the whole barrel down. And it doesn't really matter where we start or which parts we clean first. The only thing that matters is we just keep track of what we are and are not cleaning and what has and has not been cleaned yet. And again, just like the Glock video that you saw, we're going to have to clean that barrel throat. This is where the bullets actually ramp and feed into the barrel itself. We're just going to clean that off. Sometimes carbon and whatnot gets built up. So we're just going to be cleaning this out. And again, as I talk about in every one of my videos here, we're going to be talking about the 3 main steps to cleaning a gun, and the first one is breaking down the carbon. That's what we want to do is get the carbon loose. And then the next step is to lift it out with a non-lint rag of some kind so we don't leave lint and dust in the gun. And the third step is going to be lubricating for use and basically storage. And again, I'm using a bore snake just like you've seen in my other videos. This is a 45 caliber bore snake. They make them in different calibers. And basically the construction is the same though. We have a brush, a double brush portion in it. You pull that through the barrel and this acts as a giant brush, and at the end we have a loop that we can put a cleaning patch through just to check our progress and see how we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to put that through the barrel and it's very important we want to do this as the bullet travels. We want to do that in the same fashion that the bullet travels down the barrel. I'm going to be pulling that through, and before I start going through, I'm going to take my M-Pro 7 and I'm going to spray my brush cleaner, my gun cleaner on the brush portion of the bore snake, and then I'm going to pull that through. Generally you might want to do that 1 or 2 times, and I'm going to show you before we put this back together, we are going to put some lubrication on the inside of the barrel as usual. Okay, so I'm going to put that aside. The barrel's been handled for now. Now we're going to look into the slide. You can, now again, we can take this gun apart farther, and that's the subject of future videos, but at this time we're just showing you how to do the field strip. And I'm basically just going to be cleaning with a brush segment. Basically just going to be cleaning all the carbon that does in fact build up within the slide itself. We want to clean that all out. Right now I'm cleaning what's called the bolt face, which is where the rear of the cartridge actually mates with the slide. Now pretty much on any gun, especially a 1911, there's generally a cloud of carbon that builds up around the rim. And I'm just going to spray the slide and start to clean out the front sight and clean out just the whole front end of this slide. Get all that carbon out. Now, there's a couple reasons why I like the M-Pro 7 gun cleaner. It's very clean and it doesn't have the hazardous chemicals that you're going to have. Basically, the smell you're going to get from like Hops No. 9 or anything like that. So, in terms of the smell, there is no hazardous chemical solvent kind of smell to it, but it cleans extremely effectively. And a little goes a long way with the M-Pro 7 gear. And it's definitely highly recommended. I actually use it on my personal handguns and my guns of all kinds. Works really well. Okay, so the slide looks like it's done for now. We're going to move on to, some carbon does build up in your spring system here, so we're going to clean, just start cleaning this portion. Generally anywhere there's carbon that we can see, we definitely want to get to it. It doesn't require a whole lot until we can move on to the next part. I'm going to clean the plunger tube, and basically the recoil spring plunger doesn't get too much carbon on it. We can just clean that off. We're bushing. We're going to need to introduce a little bit of M-Pro 7 into our bushing here and just clean that off. Now some 1911s are not going to have bushings. An example that comes to mind, there's a couple TRP models from Springfield that don't have bushings. Kimber, some of their models don't have bushings either. And the general process though of taking the barrel and the slide off of the gun still remains the same. Okay, so I'm just going to throw some M-Pro 7 in here. Now just like I did on the barrel for the feed ramps, the feed throat of the frame itself, we're going to clean that off. Some carbon, possibly lead or copper is going to build up there. Just going to clean this whole system. I'm going to brush it clean, brush all this out. And again, this is just a generalized field strip cleaning. There is no need to take apart a gun all the way to the furthest extent every single time you shoot. That's just putting unnecessary wear and tear and tool marks and whatnot on the gun itself. And we're just going to go ahead and avoid that and just do a basic field strip. There's no reason to really take this gun apart at all further than what you see in these video series here, unless you're having it taken to a gunsmith and he'll take it apart and replace parts and whatnot. Okay, so generally speaking, this gun has just been cleaned. We have completed process 1 and 2. We've broken down the carbon, copper fouling, lead, copper, all that stuff. And now we're going to start lubricating. But before we do, I'm just going to address the magazine, just like you saw in the Glock video. The follower here, with any semi-automatic handgun, the follower is going to pick up a little bit of carbon. So with still some M-Pro 7 on my brush, but not too much here, I'm just going to clean out the lips of the magazine and the follower itself. And that's good to go at that point. Now I'm going to do the third and last process. I'm just going to lubricate this gun so when it shoots it's properly lubricated. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to spread some oil all over the outside of the barrel here. And that's going to keep it lubricated within the slide. I told you again we'd be bringing our bore snake back, so I'm going to go ahead and put it through the barrel. But before I stop, I'm going to stop right here. I'm going to throw some lubrication just along the edges of the bore snake, because I want to lubricate and keep clean. Put a small little tiny layer of oil all around the inside of the barrel. Again, there's bare metal steel in there, and we just want to keep it nice and coated to resist corrosion. Next thing that we are going to do is I'm just going to throw some gun oil here on the inside of the slide. We want to make sure there's plenty of that, and some of it right here on the base of the slide, and just kind of apply with the finger. And again, anything that's extra, we can just take that off. Okay, so I just lost a little bit when I put it on that rag there. Okay, so we have this. What we're going to do is, again, on the 1911, the barrel has to go from the front end into the slide. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and we're going to make sure the barrel is fully to the rear. This gets a little bit interesting. Again, we're looking at a gun design from a while back, so it is a little bit different than your typical Glock situation, for example. Okay, now there is a wrong and a right end of this recoil spring. The open end, now this goes towards the muzzle, but basically this is, on this end, it's the open end of the coil, and on this side, which goes towards the breech end, there's a closed off end. We want to take the closed off end of the recoil spring, and we basically want to put it through the rear end of the plunger. And actually, most 1911s have a very tight fit, which is good. Either way, that's the way we want to do it, so the open end is towards the muzzle on this gun. What we're going to have to do is, again, this is the older design, we got to be a little more, put some more caution into it. This little portion right here is called the barrel link, and we want to make sure the barrel link is standing up like such. We're going to insert the spring, and we have to align our recoil plunger system with the profile of the barrel, and then we need to push our barrel link forward like such. Okay, so what we need to do, and what I like to do, is once I have it properly set up like such, this is how it should be with the recoil spring coming out of the end of the slide. We're going to keep it upside down so that all the parts stay where they need to. And then we're going to take the slide upside down, and we're going to introduce, I'm going to see if I can put it at an angle here, and we're going to introduce the slide onto the frame when the slide and the frame are upside down. Okay, now the gun should have been put back together, and on an 80 series 1911 you have to worry about this notch here. 80 series is more common. The Kimber is the 6-hour like that. This notch right here, we just got to push it down if it's sticking up. Now the next thing we got to do is we got to kind of align it so the barrel link is lined up with the hole in the receiver, which it actually is. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reintroduce my slide stop. I'm going to put that through there. And basically, before I mess with trying to secure my slide stop, what I like to do is just check to make sure that the barrel link and the slide are properly fitted, and to make sure I didn't mess up. So if your slide wants to do that, that means everything has been done correctly. So now we want to avoid what unofficially is called the idiot scratch, where basically when I'm putting on the slide stop, a scratch will sometimes form in an arc-like pattern if I accidentally scratch the frame as I go. So to avoid that, what I'm first going to do is line up my slide with my takedown notch right in this hole. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up on my slide stop and float it into position. And basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be very carefully, I'm pushing down and forward on the slide stop to fit into this giant hole right here. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a try. Okay, now if I did it properly, the slide stop fell right into position, and the gun is still functional, everything's perfect. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, if I've made it this far, I'm going to go have the slide all the way forward, and again I'm going to put it on safe, just to make sure the slide doesn't want to move. I'm going to tilt the gun as we started. Now before I put the bushing in, I'm basically just going to apply some lubricant all over the inside of the bushing, just to make sure it's properly lubricated in the frame and the slide. And what I'm going to do is, now that I have that, I'm going to put the bushing towards the right, because that's how it comes in and out. Once it's been properly secured in the track of the slide, then I'm going to rotate my bushing, and I may have to manipulate the recoil spring a little bit, but I'm going to slide the bushing to the left, and that allows me to reintroduce my plunger. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little light coat of oil on the inside of the plunger like such, and I'm going to go ahead and on that, again we're looking at the open end of the recoil spring, I'm going to go ahead and put that plunger on. Now again, we're applying some intense pressure here. We want to make sure this is pointed in a safe direction, so if that spring flies out, it's not going to hit somebody or something. And basically what I'm going to have to do is push in that recoil spring plunger, and as I'm doing that, I got to slide the bushing to the right and trap in the slide plunger, the recoil spring plunger like such. Okay, now it has been properly trapped into the bushing system. I'm going to wipe off any excess oil all over the gun. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it off safe, and I'm going to lock the slide to the rear. And right now, everything has been put together properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a function check. So what that involves is basically I'm going to coast the slide forward. I'm going to discharge the gun and keep the trigger pulled down. Alright, now with the trigger still pulled down, I'm going to charge the gun. Now when I release the trigger, I should hear a click, and I'm going to discharge it again. Okay, now we have properly mimicked basically the action of firing the gun. So this gun has been properly put back together, and it's good to store and get ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and put the 6-hour 1911 to the side. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce the Kimber again. And again, we want to make sure that it's empty and there's no source of feed, there's no magazine in the gun. The gun has visually, we can inspect, there's nothing in the chamber. We can do a physical inspection, we can feel that there's no cartridge in the barrel. And what I'm going to go ahead and do on the Kimber Eclipse Custom 2 is I'm going to release the slide forward and coast it forward. But basically the reason why I bring this out is that a lot of modern 1911s are going to have what's called a recoil spring guide. That's going to change how this gun gets put together and taken apart. So again, I'm going to coast the slide forward, put the weapon on manual safe. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to make the gun upright. And as I do that, I have to, the system's a little bit different on a recoil spring. And there's many different types of proprietary recoil spring guides. This happens to be the most common example. But what I have to do is, just like I was pushing down on the bushing, I'll bring out that 6-hour again. Again, it's unloaded. On the 6-hour, on the standard Browning design, I had to push my recoil spring plunger and then slide the bushing to get it off. So basically the process is the same. So what I'm going to do is, instead of using my hand, I'm going to use something like this brush in this case. I'm going to push down on the rim of the recoil spring plunger, and then I'm going to start to slide the bushing. And basically what I'm doing is, now again, this is under pressure, so we got to be careful. I'm going to slide the bushing all the way to the left, and now it'll come out like such. And I'll go ahead and take that apart so you can check out what it looks like. Again, we're utilizing a takedown notch, pushing our barrel forward. And now basically this is our recoil spring guide, which goes on the 1911 just like such. And our plunger is a little bit different, but the same concept still applies. Now I'm going to show you how to put it back together once you're done cleaning the gun. So again, we're going to make sure that our barrel gets put in. We're going to put first we're going to have to put the recoil spring guide into the slide, and then we're going to have to make sure our barrel link is upright as usual. And then of course we're going to take the closed end of our recoil spring, and we're going to push that through just like such. Okay, now what we're going to have to do is take our slide and affix it to the frame. And again, like I was talking about the SIG, we're going to have to push down on the 80 series notch back there. And this gun is very dirty, just came off the rental wheel. I'm going to move it back, and again I'm just going to make sure that everything's lined up. I'm going to very carefully put my slide stop back in without putting a scratch on the frame. And now I can see that it is being properly put back together. I'm going to put it on manual safety, flip it back, and my bushing is already still in the slide. I'm going to go ahead and take my recoil spring plunger. Now that this gets a little bit different because I'm going to push it down with my finger just enough to keep it on the rim of the plunger. And then I'm going to have to push down on the rim of the plunger and then move the bushing all the way to the right. And the gun has been put back together. Thanks for watching.